Truth Talks. Please, I'm excited about the Truth Talks. They are addressing true fellowship and what it means, what true fellowship and corporate worship looks like according to the Bible.
Good evening. Man, I'm so happy to be here with y'all. I feel like it's been forever and a day. And that pressure of getting back up and doing something that you ain't did in a while. I was sitting back there while Amari was praying for us, and I was also in prayer and thinking, like, man, when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, I'm not saying that I'm having this type of pressure, but I think about standing up in front of people. That's tough. Like, man, would you want to taste? I said, no, I'm sitting back there hearing my prayers. No, I don't want to taste death. But to be able to taste or experience something for others is definitely just sitting back there. And somehow my mind went to a station in Japan, and I thought about crazy how all times work. But I thought about an episode of The Simpsons that I watched, and Homer Simpson, he went to a sushi restaurant, and they gave him blowfish. Now, if you know anything about blowfish, you do or you don't, blowfish could be deadly if it's not prepared the proper way. It's called fugu, actually. And if that blowfish isn't properly prepared the proper way, the person who consumes it, they normally die within 24 hours, a horrible death. Well, when you think about the job that or the task or the work that's getting ready to be before me, I think about it like that fugu. When you look at how many chefs in the world that can prepare a meal of that precision, it's normally not that many. So anytime I sit down, I consider myself to be in a realm with some of the greatest chefs, and I hope that my preparation, the hands that God put on me to see the world, that I prepare it right, and that you don't end up like Homer Simpson, worrying about dying for 24 hours just to find out that the meal was prepared right. So if you got questions in the middle of the meal, don't hesitate to ask. If you got things that you want to know, don't hesitate to ask. If you got things you want to teach me, because this is our session, our group. Man, it's a lot of people here tonight. Did y'all put a bat signal out for all the Firm Foundation? I don't think we're missing it. You sure is Isaiah on the thing? Because that'll just make it.
No, he ain't that.
Y'all bring it out, man. No. So I say that is to say there's great chefs here who prepare some delicate meals that if they're not prepared right, they could possibly touch the tongue of someone else and they can go out there and cause poison amongst us. We learn that as we study James. And as we get ready to enjoy this meal, I'm just happy that God is using my hands to prepare it. So the opening is, we finished off last time, because last time I was up here, I had like Samuel, and we was all up and through the Old Testament. And we talked about the kings, the first king, the very first king. Who's the very first king? You know what? I like that answer. Do you got my clip? Let me check my notes. No, I didn't write that down. So the very first king we know is Jesus, but in the history of Israel, who's the very first king? King Saul, right? Because the Israelites came together as a tribe and they walked up to Samuel and said, hey, Samuel, we need a team. And God said, wait a minute, I am the team. And they said, no, we need another team. So they switched out the team, and then we get Saul, and we get all the things that Saul do. When we see Saul's falling, we see Saul's death, and then who steps up? David, the mighty man who was running from Saul in all of book 1 and a little bit of to be continued in book 2. So he was a running man. If he had to move, he had to get about. So we see David. And when we get to the end of Samuel, we think that it's like, yes, King David is all there. Can somebody read the very end of Samuel? The last book. Last chapter. Just go to the last paragraph, last sentence, Second Samuel. I'm sorry.
Verse or what?
No, let's go to the last verse.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go with the last verse.
And David built there an altar unto the Lord and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. So the Lord was entreated for the land, and the plague was stayed from Israel.
Now that looked like a end, right? You're like, all right, Second Samuel is ending. The plague is done in Israel. David has paid for what he did. So you think that it's over, right? So if you go from Second Samuel and to go to the next book would be First Kings in your Bible, right? What does the first thing in First Kings say in the Bible?
Now, King David was old.
Wait a minute. 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 Wait a cotton picking minute. And when I think about David going from the run, doing all of these things, he just got old on us? It was a line in between. So where's that line in between? But we can't just jump into Chronicles, because didn't Kings, First and Second Kings, come before Chronicles? What happened? What happened to make those stories have to be written like that particular way so many years later? Anybody know?
It wasn't written in chronological order.
It wasn't.
It's.
But do you think they,
precise.
go ahead. Do you think they told the story out of order?
I really don't. We just think it's out of order because that's man's way of thinking.
Very good.
I like that. Very good point. But how about this? How about the men that wrote it were dealing with something very difficult? In fact, their whole entire town, their whole entire city, let's think about Metropolis, New York, LA, had been destroyed. Nothing. Now, what we don't understand too is some of the times when towns get destroyed, every new ruler doesn't come in and just wipe everything out. What is learned? So when they came in, and Nebuchadnezzar, that we learned, took these men in, they were not slow men, they were educated men. And even though their city had failed, the way that history had always been taught throughout Jerusalem was kept, and that was oral tradition. Because the thing about when we stand up here as the teachers, as the pastors, as the ones that's giving out the lesson, you know, we can see something that everybody out there, they either believe us or they don't. They trust what we're saying or they not. And a lot of times we got to go back and we say, well, this is what I said about this voice, but since you don't trust me, let me show you somewhere else. And if you don't trust me enough, I'll show you somewhere else. But I'm asking you tonight, because this is a whole lot of history. The Chronicles cover from the beginning of Adam all the way to David, right? But I want to take you a little further, because remember how we talked about how things are written in context and pieces, or as you say, man got the hand on a little bit. Well, Matthew kind of wanted to set some things straight. So what if I told you take a break, just the way that David took a break, or the writers took a break from the end of Samuel's in between, you know, first Chronicles and how they go, or Kings, messing up myself. Second Samuel, First Kings, how that writer left that gap in there, but it wasn't, right? We got the oral tradition later on when they was in Babylon, and they said, we are together, we have been sacked, our towns are bad, everything is gone, let's put this history back together. Well, Matthew continued with that history. So not only do we see a connection from David to Jesus, but if I could show you a connection from Jesus to Adam, which not only makes when Jesus comes and say, Son of Man, even more, because we are all sons of Adam. But you ever had like a cousin or a friend who be like, yeah, that's my cousin. You're like, well, how are y'all related? And then he start telling you like, you know, related. You like a cousin of a cousin of a cousin of an uncle to come by every once in a while, get a slice of pie. But Jesus can actually trace his lineage right back there to Adam, to where it all started. And we can see that when that prophecy is said to Eve, what was the prophecy?
Seed will crush his head.
Yeah, we thought like a seed, like an actual one of your sons, your one, not somebody that's a related one that we can trace back to you will crush that snake's head. So let's get started. What? Oh yeah, I almost jumped in there too fast. Oh yeah, back to David. So David is old. So I asked, when we get into here, we got to break this up. We got to take the Chronicles, the Kings, and all of those stories, past and present, to see how it shaped current Israel, to see what led us into where we went, where we learned in the book of Daniel. But we got to see that bloodline first. So let's go through it, because if you read Chronicles on your own the first time or at some point, Chronicles normally people look at it as a snoozer book. Oh man, I can't sit here and stomach through all the lineage. It's just too many. Who begot this person? Baby begot, but that, but begot. And next thing you know, you sitting there, you halfway asleep, and you're on chapter 9. You're like, oh look, it's David.
A lot of paper tracking.
Yeah, you know. So I get it. It's a lot to track. But if I can help you understand Chronicles a little better, is Remember, it's showing you about David. David has just now you got to take the mindset of the people who are in Babylon, who is keeping the oral history, who has been transferred and to this different place, but their languages are now, because when they went into Babylon, they had two different languages. There was the people who spoke regular Hebrew, and then they had the people who spoke Paleo Hebrew. So those two languages right there alone, just getting information to each other, probably was called. So somebody said, hey, we got to make sure we get this written down. Now, with Chronicles being later and it being oral tradition, Chronicles is one of the books where you get most people, they want to argue about the different things. Who was there? Is that true? Well, did they leave that name out? Well, what happened here? Well, I say, let's listen to the scriptures and let the scriptures tell us what happened to those people, who they were, why their names was possibly changed for the Chronicles. So let's get into the mindset of the people. Let's start thinking about the people who are putting the Chronicles, the chronological order of Adam to David in line. So when you see some of these families jump around, hopefully I can help you out and tell you what family we're talking about. Even when they get to simple parts where it's like, hey, we know Noah. Don't stop there. Keep following the line. All right, this is the reading part. Everybody drank their coffee before they came in here? No, I'm gonna try to make Chronicles as exciting as possible. So we are going to start, instead of First Kings, we're going to start in First Chronicles. And you can't skip over the genealogy just to get to the excitement of Chronicles, because it's an exciting book. All right, some places we'll belabor and hang out. Some places we'll go ahead and zoom by. We're not going to skip anything. It might even be times where I say, hey, gather around as much as you can, so a little bit of movement if you can, and let's go take a look at this board, that board, and that board. Not to print them out, but it's also saying when we have time, look at those boards. But it may be moments that those boards may help you visualize it better than my words can, or somebody else may be able to do it. But if you can't, you have so many illustrations of the genealogy and how it goes to put all these different people in there. Anybody noticing some of the genealogy reading that Ishmael is still in there? Ishmael is the progenitor of who?
That's Abraham's.
Abraham, but whose son is it? I mean, but that's his first son, right? And in there they talk about Abraham, Ishmael's 12 sons.
Right.
So it breaks it down. We're going to see the Ishmaelites. We're going to see how the Ishmaelites blended. We're going to see some of the people who got in trouble for doing things that they weren't supposed to when they brought their name up specifically in the rolls. Because if you notice, everybody had something. Everybody had something that they can mention, but in certain places in the Chronicles, they specifically said it by name, this person, and let's tell you. So we may go take a look at those things. So now that the wheels have been greased, let's go to the text. Now we start here with Adam, and Adam goes to Seth and Enoch. Now let's pause for a second at Enoch. Enoch is mentioned throughout the scriptures, but a lot of the things that we know about Enoch is from what non-canonical scriptures, books that were written, but when the 70 plus men came together to put the books together, they said that this book right here is not something we want to put in a canonical because it does not fit in the profitable building of faith. But it is a book that you can go read and study. I always say that because James mentioned that Enoch, what was it? Not James, Jude. He mentions Enoch. And if that is mentioned, it means it's a book that you should be looking at. So if Enoch is in a role, this is something that we shouldn't blow by it just because, a lot of the books are non-canonical. I challenge you to go open your mind and read if it's sound doctrine, meaning what is being taught in there makes sense.
For Enoch.
Enoch, but we getting down to Enoch. Like I said, I'm sorry. I'm not going to belabor a lot of the names because it's a lot of them. And if I butcher a name, it's a lot. But I will speak on the ones that throughout this list maybe had controversial questions, things about these particular people like, hey, why does it say this about Simeon? Anybody ever question why Joseph was the one that went into Egypt, even though Simeon was the oldest? Why Joseph was looked at as having the birthright versus the older brother? So it's a lot of things. Remember, this is a culture that is built rich on this right here. They were very particular about tracking lineage through history. Most of us nowadays, we can probably go back the max 3 generations of who we are. You have to look at it. Jesus came through 40 and 2 generations. and it was well tracked, well documented over thousands of years because of these people who took the time to do it. So we're gonna take the time to read it. All right, so we got Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech. Lamech was one of them ones, right? He was definitely he had his sayings. And a lot of the sayings that came from King Lamech was what? If a man does what to me, I'll do what to them. No, that was, am I getting my kings wrong? Help me out here. Did y'all read it or was I the only one that read it? I can tell y'all anything, then good. So who was he? Like these people had prominent roles because this is before the fall. All of these people played a role in what was going on prior to the fall. So when you see the history of how they're keeping it, this is an illustration of everything that was happening prior to the fall. Because the very next name you get after Lamech, right? Flood. Well, the flood, the fall is the garden, the flood. So thank you. But still, them people was there at the flood. All right. So we roll into Noah, and we know that Noah. Now this is where a lot of the controversy and a lot of the big kingdoms kind of start. We know what happened with Noah and his sons, and we know what Noah cursed his Ham's son that was going to be, right? Canaan, right? So we see that the land, Noah is actually cursing an individual son, but he's more talking about something so vast as a people, because these were the people that stepped off the boats and were going out to start the new world. Ham went and started. Y'all know what Ham went and started? Because it tell you in the genealogy of his kids. So let's go. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Right? The sons of Noah, the sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, tell me out with this, Madai, and there it is, and Tubal, and Meshech, and Teres, and the sons of Gomer. Like now we're getting ready to get into, so we got to pause at moments because now we're getting ready to get into another group of sons. Right? It's going to do that. It's going to tell you what son, and then them sons had sons because lineage was important. And some of those lineage tracked down into the priesthood. Some of those lineage tracked down into the mighty men that David was with. So we see that these people are all interconnected. But at the end of the day, this particular thing is lining from Adam to David. Because to them, now remember, the Chronicles came years later after the fall. Why is David's kingship still so important to the chroniclers? Why are they keeping records? They're in Babylon. They can live the Babylonian life. They can claim that King Nebuchadnezzar is the only king in the world, and we don't need a history of that. But the records are being kept for a reason, not for Babylon, so that the day then when Jesus comes, there is no question. So let's continue on. So as you see, now it's not just names. The names should have the stories that we study and go into, so when we see the names, we can put them with the stories. Chronicles start to open up because now you're walking through the Bible in a faster manner, just by the name, by the instance, by what's going on. All right, so I was going to say we could go up here and look at some of the board, but again, don't move. We see that Japheth line, I don't know, it's very thin. Japheth line, Shem line, they all kind of start big and then they travel down. So the yellow is probably most of the people that come from Shem. When you hear Shem, a lot of times, well, in my studies when I went in there was Shemitic. So right, you hear people say, oh, anti-Semitic, anti-Shemitic, because those are the people of Shem. And Shem lived a very long time. Actually, Shem lived long enough to be in whose time? Abraham. I mean, they overlap. Abraham was alive when Shem was alive. So you have, and it's the thing, again, non-canonical books, you'll hear me mention them, but I would just, you can see the stories in the scriptures. So when Abraham left his father to go to where he was, he also seeked. God gave him the information, but in some of the non-canonical books, we see that Abraham actually went and sat with Shem, and he learned from him. Now there are all types of things out there that you can get into a rabbit hole with and say, who was Shem? Who is this? Well, Shem was the king of Jerusalem. That was the area that he was in. So we see Shem and we see his family. We see Shem's family grow. We see Japheth's family grow. We see Ham's family grow. And I'm going to go right here to Ham for a little bit. Not so much to push on Canaan, because we know what happened to him. But let's look at some of Ham's other sons. So Ham had Cush, all right, the Cushites, and he had Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. We always hear about Canaan, but we forget that what is Mizraim? Or some people, Bible might say something else. What was the other one? I heard somebody over here say it. Egypt. So Ham's children was Egypt. Now it's kind of funny here, because when we look at how the world is panning out from these small groups of people, and they're having their children, and their children are growing up in towns and cities, and we see that Egypt is a relation to Ham, right? Yes. So in a world of logic, somebody should say, "Hey, that's brother. You shouldn't be doing me like that. Don't beat me up and make me build your cities." But we didn't see that. So now we see why when God says, "I'm going to punish you for what you did to your brother," he's not talking about the brother as in, "Hey, this is my brother right here. We're in the same blood family. How you doing?" No, he's talking about nations. And I want you to understand it is as it grows, God is pulling out the nations in these chronicles. They're telling you how these nations got to be big and why they shouldn't be stepping on each other, why they shouldn't be doing everything. Why is the punishment so harsh? Because that's your brother. And we see how the lineage is intertwined. We know that if we get down here, as we get to David, and we're gonna walk through these names, so don't nobody rush. I hope y'all got time. As we walk through these names, we'll see how brother forgot who brother was, and then later on, they turned on lineage. Y'all remember who Joseph got sold to? Egypt was the last place that Joseph went. Who took Joseph into Egypt? It was one of Abraham's sons. And if it wasn't Israel, then who took Joseph in there? It was a group of people that was walking on the road, and while they was in the hole, these group of people walked by and say, "Hey, what you got there?" And they said, "Pull that young Hebrew boy out." And thanks to the help to my wife who helped me study. When we get to Abraham, we'll talk about how he got the name, where Hebrew came from. That was a good one. I had to dig back into some other books too. But when we see that Jacob, and I know we seem like we're down the line, but we're not. We're still talking about this family, Shem and Ham. Japheth is over somewhere else in the other world. Like, I ain't got nothing to do with that. Y'all two, Dad talked about you and him. So I'm just going to go over here and live my life. Do my thing. I ain't bothering nobody. But when we look at these two brothers, we see that conflict has already been set in path for generations to come. Any questions? Clear as mud? Is the genealogy getting better? Is it still a snooze fest? Not at all. So the son of Cush, right? Cush has all these different sons, but I want you to notice in here where it says, "And the son of Cush is Ramah, and Cush brought forth Nimrod." Now Nimrod, we all know Nimrod's deal in the scriptures, right? But it's funny because when we talk about Nimrod, and Nimrod did what? Being mighty on the earth, Nimrod did what? He was the hunter of men, right? Nimrod was not that guy that was on the right side. Was he on the right side or the wrong side? Wrong side. And then what Nimrod decided they want to do?
Try to build a tower to see God.
Build a tower to see God. So when we read this and we hear that Nimrod wanted to build a tower to see God, and then we travel a little further in the genealogy, I'm giving y'all a little bit later on, or a little bit more into it. And we see Peleg, right? Ain't that his name? Let's just keep reading down the line. Because I'll be moving through the genealogy to make it fun, but I see y'all want me to read the names. All right. And Cush bore now we had Chronicles 1:10. I'm getting good at that, telling us where we at, some people. Because I just be wanting to tell a story because it's such a good one. All right, and Cush brought forth Nimrod. So Cush was also in the area which we would probably call, because remember, this was all one big land until it kind of started to separate. All right, I'm giving the history of what we see here in the scriptures, how close everything was. So Cush will be in the Africa area. Can't tell you where we're at in the area, but we know that that's where Egypt is. Right. So Cush, the Cushites, they trickle down in there. So we got Nimrod being mighty on the earth, and Mizraim brought forth Ludum and Anamin And now, if I'm messing these names up, please forgive me, Lord. And Lehebim, and we're gonna go with that one. And Paris, and Paris, huh?
To him.
Now, there you go. Look, we need you. I'm gonna call you up so I can get all the names said right. To him. Better read it than me. I just tell good stories. All right. So we see the continuation of the family, but then after it kind of gives you a quick, hey, this is it. It goes right into the sons of Shem. And when it goes into the sons of Shem, it's going to kind of point out the opposite of some of the things that the sons of Nimrod was doing. If you read it and you see it, we already see that there is a people and then there's not a people. Even the Chronicles identify election, who's in lineage and who's not. Even in a place where lineage might have been, possibly could be possibly broken, torn throughout history, we see lineages kept intact by the individual, again, walking it from Adam to David. It's important that we see Adam to David, because once we go into Matthew's, really quick, we're going to see Adam all the way to Jesus.
Okay. Bring it on.
Ready, all right. All right. So the son of Shem, the sons of Shem. Shem has a lot of sons. Lud, Aram, Utz, Hall, Gether, Meshech, Arapakashad brought forth Shelah, and Shelah brought forth Eber. Now, when we get to Eber, keep in mind who Eber is. Be very mindful who Eber is, because because up until this point, there is no Israel. There is no Hebrew. They are the nations that are growing in those areas. They're growing by the tribesmen that were in those tribes, because again, this is also a nation to where the kings aren't uprising. When we see Shem, there's 5 new kings. Abraham is going through the land these kings have established, took whatever land they wanted because, well, it's the beginning. And who's there to tell them they can't? Except it's God's land, right? We see that Abraham is the only one that gets God's, that get his, what is it? What's the word? Word is living. What is it? Inheritance. There it is. The word was living. Look, I had to reach for it. Sorry. I had to see where it was at. Inheritance. She's somewhere in it. Huh? Yeah, when I started scratching my head, I just reached for it. It's somewhere out there. So I knew somebody's gonna put it out there as a word. I'll eventually get it. Hey, throw me that word real quick. Inheritance. See how it sound like it was mine? One of y'all prayed hard enough for me to where I got it. It came to my head. But so Eber was born 2 sons. The name is Peleg. For when it says, for in the earth the day was divided. All right, so now we already see that the first son, when they talking about Nimrod and this mighty man, and we call him, he's a manhunter. He was out there, and Nimrod said, we're going to get together, we're going to build us a tower, brick by brick, and that tower is going to be the best tower, and it's going to reach up to God, and we're going to be able to walk right into the throne room. I think that's what Nimrod probably, which we got, sir.
Yeah, because you mentioned you want to show where Jesus was in the genealogy of Adam. And if it can help them not tire out, I want them to notice something here in verse 17. In verse 4, he mentions Noah's 3 sons. Okay, and then he starts, when you start talking about the 3 sons in verse 5, he starts with Japheth. Okay, and then he comes down in verse 8 and starts talking about Ham. But he comes down in verse 17 and starts talking about Shem. So if they can just if they got a pencil underline Adam in verse 1, see that? And then underline Shem in verse 4, and then come down and underline Shem in verse. Go there and keep following the genealogy of Jesus, just so they'll track it. You made an important point that Jesus is in the lineage of Adam, and we want to follow it as we go through here. If you don't mind, I walk with you, so when they get to the genealogies of Matthew and Luke,
they'll stick and track it. There won't be no guesswork in it. And I just want to share this also. Peter had mentioned this.
A couple of people here who know these charts. And so during your spare time, if you want to get with a couple of us, we can help you track, because you can tire out and looking at the genealogy if you see them like worthless names. But the names are like treasures. Okay, get them and track it all the way through here. Until you make the world a difference in understanding, now we see why the names are in here, because it's important that we can prove that Jesus is the one to sit on the throne.
And that's what I was going to say. A lot of people, when we first think about Jesus Christ, we see Jesus sitting on the throne. That's what you, and rightfully so. That is what's said. But I love the beauty of seeing Jesus all the way back to Adam, to see, not only to understand the prophecy being fulfilled in the end, because a lot of people metaphorically, they understand that prophecy was fulfilled in the end with Jesus Christ. But now when Jesus is actually saying those words, it's literally, this is the connection. God to Adam. Man falls. And in the middle, God back to Adam. Simplified. When we think of like what the Hebrew texts say, or what Romans talk about the imputation of Adam's sins just naturally being accepted by everyone else in here. But the salvation of Christ is something we also have to naturally accept. You see what I'm saying? You have to admit one. So we have to show Jesus coming through Adam's line, because it reconnects back to, it's almost like, so maybe show my age a little bit. That's kind of a funny thing to say in this day and age. But when I was little, my mom had one of the phones, right? The little cord phones. You know, everybody got cell phones now. A corded phone. But what my mom used to do to be kind of on a, if I was on the phone too long and say something, she would just disconnect the other piece. I said, wow, that's a simple way to disconnect things. But yet the phone was still doing what the phone wanted to do. I would plug it back up and the person was there. It was like, yeah, I couldn't hear you. So think about this. Adam disconnected us. And through all of these people that we see here, good and bad, because when we look at the genealogy of David, it's gonna stay with David, but it's gonna also mention some names, and then you're like, whoa, wait a minute, they was in that line. They was in that genealogy. So when we look at that, it's the phone call got disconnected at the thing, talking to God one-on-one. God, we're in the garden, enjoying, embracing. Our sin came, pull the plug. We're still down there trying to talk to God. And Jesus Christ said, hey guys, y'all missing something. Let me just plug the phone back up for you. But we wouldn't know that the phone was unplugged, because we thought we were still having a good conversation because somebody went on online having it. So when we see this genealogy and this lineage, just keep walking through it. It's hard, but look for Christ. Look for how in these names we see the story of that particular thing being wiped out at every step in the good people. But we also see the bad people. And as I was saying, when we talked about Peleg, right? He's the opposite of Nimrod. He was a good son. And he was also talked about when it said, what's his name? Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Jonathan, Jotin. Did I say that right? John, it got a T in there. Mine got a, okay. So so with Peleg, right? It's saying that in the time when Nimrod was trying to gather up and put everybody together, your son Nimrod is out here trying to put everything together to make everybody come up to have one voice. And Peleg is coming in a time where he's standing against that in the division. And that's why his name means Peleg. In the days the earth were divided, for it's in the name. So when we talk about him, he's talking about that particular thing that's happening. Nimrod versus Shem. We're almost identifying kind of like two paths here. How there is a path of righteousness, that those who follow that path of righteousness are going, and I wanted to show that. All right. And Jonathan brought, because right now I don't say nothing about his brother. It's all about Peleg right there. Just going to tell you. And I have some more notes and stuff that when we get a little bit more in depth and we talk about these people a little bit more in depth, or they pop back up in somewhere, we'll get to it. But a lot of the notes, that's real quick and easy. If you want to go back and read it, I will actually tell you where you can read that at, because I know people like to go back and read.
Okay, another one now. We underline Shem, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Forget that.
Ebor is another one you want to underline. We're gonna worship to
EBAL, right?
BER.
Oh, EBER.
All right. So once they talk about Peleg, you kind of the author of the Chronicles, the men who were sitting down in Babylon, they start getting back together. They said, all right, we talked about Peleg. We gave you a Nimrod Peleg. We showing it to you. And then from there, they said, look, let's just continue with the names. And they go through the rest of the names, Horm, Azazel. They just run through them. Right. Then you get to it gets to 23. They're finishing up the name, and they say these were the sons of Jotham. They told all his sons, broke it down. And they said, all these are sons of Jotham. And Shem, Arapashad, Shelah, Eber, Peleg, Ru, Sureg, Nahor, Terah, and Abram. Oh, wait a minute.
Abraham.
So yeah, if you look at that, Abraham right there. Abraham didn't even wait to get to chapter. I mean, he didn't get to wait chapter 2. He came in. So when we see Abraham, right, again, this is not to talk about any type of race or connection. It's actually to show how everything is really in line. And somehow when we try to put things on it, we separate. What was Abraham? Where did Abraham come from? What land? Ur. Now, wasn't Ur somewhere back in here? Wasn't he one of the children? It was Ur, right? That was Ur. So he lived in that land. Who else lived in the land of Ur? There was a lot of good people living in Ur. Where Job live at? Did Job live somewhere in one of them U towns? Or was it Ur or Utz? He was in one of the U towns. Somebody say, hey, man, where you go? Go to Washington. Which one? State or state or district? So when we think of that, we see these towns. These towns were, again, the sons. They settled. They grew. They built. Think when we see Jacob, by the time he gets to Egypt, how many kids he got? How many people coming in tow with him? A lot. I think it was like 70 something. They just rolled up on Egypt, like, we here, huh? Yeah, they rolled up. Egypt, we here. So we see that this continues to walk. But we also see Abraham. And Abraham was not a Jew. Abraham was, what we say, the first time they said Hebrew? He was Chaldean. He was Chaldean. The word Hebrew, now this is, you see, it came from Eber. Man, my notes all jumbled. Trust me, I'm gonna get it locked on. See, the thing about Chronicles is you don't got no real pause places. You just got to keep talking about these names. But Eber, his name, as soon as I can find it, because I want to give it to you. Eber. Long story short, once I find out, I'll give it to you, the verse and everything. Long story short, Abraham was not a Jew. Abraham was Chaldean. The Chaldeans were close to the Sumerians. Not the Samaria, like the people. Like there was a race of people. And a lot of times people get those two people confused. A lot of people say, oh, well, this person is related. No, you're confusing the names. Sumerians are going to come a lot later. Samaria was its own kingdom. They had their own God. They had their own belief. And Abraham, who was there, he saw his father. He saw all of the house idols that his father would go and worship to. Now, and the scriptures here, but in the book of Jasher, it does go a little bit more in depth. Now, I like the scriptures hit it on for him. He got mad and he left. But I like what the book of Jasher said. He said he went in his father's house after talking to God, because we see Abraham in the story, and Abraham said, God come, and then next thing you know, we see Abraham on the desert. But Abraham went back home. After knowing God, you know what Abraham went back home with? This is what the story said. So he went back in the house and he destroyed every idol in his house. And then he ran to where God told him to go to. It was that serious on that day, because the Chaldeans, they monitored everything, the stars. That's how they tell. Now, where else did the Chaldeans? And I love, we just went into Daniel. So Abraham, being a Chaldean, being a Sumerian, they valued everything by the stars. And I know we stand a lot on Abraham, because Abraham has a purpose in this. We all know he do. But when we talk about Abraham versus Daniel, we see the Chaldeans are still there. In fact, who comes to see Jesus on the night that he was born? Who was it? The same people who got visited, that God visited so long ago and tell him about his ancestors' numerous stars. It was the Chaldeans. They showed up. So we see this Chaldean, we see that Abraham was a Chaldean. We know that his father, they were in that land, they were Chaldeans, but the term Hebrew came from there. All right, so now we got our Hebrews. Because we have walked through the lineage, and time is kind of ticking away. I told you it's going to take a while, but we're going to get there. We have walked through the lineage, and we see Abraham, a Hebrew, not a Jew. So why is this a big deal? Why would this be even conversational? What are we learning in church on Sunday about what Pastor Amari was teaching it? Not Jew nor Gentile. Because your beginning wasn't Jew or Gentile. Your beginning had no name. God tell you this, y'all was nobody. This lineage right here is all, when he tells Israel, you weren't special, but I made you mine, which made you special. So when we see this lineage right here, we're seeing that God is saying, I kept this intact just for me. This was, even though everybody who had that part in here, because we do know God can erase everything. He told Moses, he said, hey, Moses, these people out here, they acting crazy. Should we just start over? Like with you? And Moses was like, wait a minute, I barely can talk. You know, my speech ain't that good. You don't want to start a whole nation? He said, all right. God said, all right, but you better get them in order. We even gonna see some of that in here. We're gonna see some of those people that weren't in order in the Chronicles. Told you, Chronicles is a full-blown story. We didn't even make it out the first chapter yet. All right. So Abraham. Oh, question. How many sons did Abraham have? That's not a trick question. It is not a trick question at all. How many sons did Abraham have? No, I'm talking about actual children.
About the chosen, the Ishmael and the
Isaac. Don't worry about it. We get to
but as I was reading, I come to find out that there were other children.
Now here's the thing.
Wow.
Those children, when I went and looked it up, those children, they were not mistreated.
No.
They weren't. Abraham said, now listen, Abraham in the Bible said, hey, y'all go ahead, go start your own thing. He did the same thing he did with Ishmael. But it's something very funny that it says about Isaac when you're reading the lineage. Anybody read that part what it said about Isaac? And Abraham, all these sons, and you know the one thing he says about Isaac. What'd he say? Anybody know? It ain't that far down. Come on, help me out. Don't leave me up here by myself. He said, Isaac is my
Only
begotten son. What verse is that? It's okay. We don't need to know a verse because we know that you read it and you saw that too. Out of all of the lists, we see Abraham had sons. He got Ishmael. He got 6 by his concubine. He lied. That
27 and 28 doesn't even mention these other children. It says Abraham, the same as Abram. 28, the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael. It doesn't even mention the other children.
So you get down to 32.
So see, that's what I was saying. It kind of blew me out of the water when I read that there were others, but
Now,
please give me.
no, go ahead. I was going to say, remember, the genealogy is going out of order.
remember and that's why I was calling these names out and had y'all to underline it. Because the Holy Spirit is on a mission here.
Mhm.
You know, as he said that he's gonna show where Jesus Christ is in the lineage of Adam. But in showing where Jesus Christ is in the lineage of Adam, it's also gonna show that he's not in the lineage of everybody. Okay, and that's when some of these names I had y'all underlined, if you follow it all the way, by the time we get through with this and when we start going to the other scriptures, you'll see that other names was omitted because what the Holy Spirit is trying to get us to understand. Who's the one who sat on the throne? From Genesis to Revelation is about the Lord Jesus Christ.
He's been on the throne
Now,
ever since.
we have the other candidates in the name in the Bible here, I like to call them cast members. Because they're part of the theistic show on earth.
Mhm.
But it's like the prodigal son. The two sons, the story is not about the two sons, the story is about the heart of the father.
Right.
But the two sons is in here just to kind of show the heart of the father. So all these names are in here to show that though all his names are here, he does not move out of the line of Adam. And other names are in there to carry that lineage on. And that's why I had you underline, because eventually you'll lose track of who belongs to who. If you don't, and then you're tired, so we're not going to Bible study next Wednesday because you're just going to take it out. It's important. Trust me, if you miss this.
We're not gonna lose anything, because we're just gonna tell us a story. I'm gonna give you the scriptures to go back. See, I want you to trust what I'm saying. And then I'm gonna give it to you, you can go verify. Remember what I told you about Peleg? My notes finally caught up to my brain. All right, so Peleg, takeaway. So Peleg lived during the time of great change before the earth and Tower of Babel. His name, which meant division or brooks, and associated with the division of the earth being divided. Remember the language, crap. So Peleg and Nimrod had opposite roles. But sometimes in the scriptures we hear Peleg, but we don't really go into depth. But right here in the Chronicles, it took time to say that. So I took time to go look it up. All right, so Peleg's story teaches us that we all live in a world that is consistently changing, and followers of God, we must adapt and be faithful and trust in God's sovereignty. These are lessons learned. The takeaway. Peleg reminds us that even in times of great change and uncertainty, we can trust in God's goodness and perfection. So while we reflect, how do we handle change and uncertainty in our life? How we can trust God? We can take a look at what Peleg did when everything seemed like it's coming together, and for the bad, we stay on the course for the good of God. All right, now, Abraham's wife. Oh, to get those answers about Peleg, here's the scriptures. Make sure I'm giving them right. All right. So Genesis 5, 31 and 32, 11 to 16, Genesis 11, 16 through 19, and then Chronicles 1, 19 to 25. What we just read. Very short in there, but go back to Genesis. Read up on Peleg. Now, we're talking about Abraham's wife and his other children. All right. So Abraham had, after Sarah died, because I don't want anybody to think that Abraham was just out here just making a bunch of kids. Abraham lived old, but Sarah died first. And when Sarah died, Abraham took one of his concubines. Now the word, go for it. So, no, he took one of his concubines. Now, taking a concubine was nothing abnormal then. We seen it. Sarah said, go ahead, take Hagar. It was something that was common in the culture, but it didn't make it right. Because we hear what Paul taught. We see what the lessons were. Again, this is not to badger anybody in the scripture with a modern day mind. This is to understand what took place in the scriptures right now was preached about in the church age, about having one wife. Did Abraham forget? You see what I'm saying? He didn't, because this was the building of the lineage of Christ. So these are the things that had to take place. You know, we always ask, well, if it would have just been Abraham had a son, then that person had a son, then that person had a son, and that person had a son, that would have been clear as mud for us, right? But then the opposition would have found a way. So God put it right here in front of our face to go and read it for yourself. And if you got any questions about Jesus Christ's lineage, from Jesus to David as a king, or from Jesus, the reconnector, to Adam, to where he disconnected, you got it right here. It's all right here. And it's, I mean, a lot of times, you know, we go out of the Chronicles because it seems like it's difficult, but it's difficult because when we read the scripture, sometimes, myself included, those names get difficult. We know their stories, but we forgot their names. And this is right in these Chronicles right here, just to open it, because we're going to get into a story. When you hear David, it's people out there fighting lions. It's people running across battlefields just to get some water. It's all types of stuff that David is doing. He was a mighty man. But right here, this is the origin story of David. This is the line to where we get to David. And then from David, we'll go ahead and take a quick peek into Christ, because I know somebody else is teaching Matthew, so I'm not going to do that long, but we'll get there. So bear with me. Y'all do know it's 9 chapters of lineage, right? Are y'all bored yet, or are y'all interested? Have I piqued your interest in some place that in Chronicles that it wasn't? You know what? I could shut up shop right now, teach anything else, because I've made Chronicles, the words that come out of their mouth has changed, you know, as opposed to what the echo was before. People saying Chronicles different. But let's continue to travel on. So now we got Abraham, right? Oh, and I was going to tell you about his wife, because that's the thing people like. Did you see stories inside the story? So after Sarah died, Abraham married one of his concubines. His concubine is Keturah. Keturah was Abraham's concubine or wife in those terms. After the death of his wife Sarah, he also had sent Hagar away, the mother of Ishmael. So after all this happened, They get sent away. A lot of times those stories get summarized. But to hear it in definitive, you go to Genesis 11:29 to 31, because we're getting close to it. Abraham had sons, Ishmael and Hagar, servant, Genesis 16:1 through 16. Abraham sent Hagar away, Genesis 21:8 through 21. And the beautiful thing is, God made a promise to Ishmael. You know what he promised Ishmael? That he will build him up a kingdom, right? And when we look in here in Ishmael's lineage, how many sons did Ishmael have? Anybody count that? It's very funny. I guarantee it's probably close to something else we're very familiar with. What? How many? How many children? Man, this microphone keep falling over. Man, that's shocking right there, right? So Ishmael had 12 children. Now let's say we don't know. We don't have Ishmael's documented lineage down here, because have you asked those that read the Quran to show you anything? You know what the first thing they're gonna do after they read the Quran? They're gonna say, well, it talks about the Bible. And the only place in here that we talk about the lineage of Ishmael is right there. So anytime they go talk about lineage or the tribal things, a lot of it you got to go through history, wars, different things. But right here, the only time we hear about Ishmael is right there. And we see that God fulfilled the promise that he said to Abraham. Ishmael not only grew, Ishmael had 12 sons. And those 12 sons did exactly what Jacob's kids did, minus the bondage, because we don't hear stories about them going in bondage, because we see it right here. Obviously, the Ishmaelites was on the same road to go up to Egypt during that time as the Hebrew boys was. What was their mission at the time? Where were they going? They were just supposed to be out in the field, just taking care of stuff, but they decided to kill their brothers, so they was like, man, we got to come up with a plan. More on that later, because we got to talk about how that lineage got passed. So who was the first son? We'll get to that later too. So much fun. All right, so we see that all of this lineage continue, and I want you to understand too. It seems like it's very patriarchal. Man, this person had this and that person had that. We even see places in there, because I'm ready to kind of close it down here so we can keep on time. We even see places in the scripture where God said, this person, I didn't like him, so I killed him. Paraphrasing. He said he did evil and he died. Very particular about that one person. And you go and you look up the story, and it's pretty interesting. He did evil and he died. So even in the Chronicles and the lineage, they're keeping that. All right, so we got Abraham, Isaac. I've told you of his daughters. Keturah was Abraham, partner after Hagar, after Sarah's death, and then we go into lineage. All right, clear as mud. We figured out how Abraham had other kids. Abraham had a huge family. Not only is the promise fulfilled in Isaac and Jacob, but we see Abraham had a big family over there too. All right, so Abraham had a lot of kids, man. You got a chance. Telling people that all the time, man. Count them stars, man. You got a chance. You one of them. All right. So continuing on. Laughing too much. So after Abraham, he had his kids, then Isaac, and Isaac had his kids. Now we don't hear a lot about Isaac. We hear that Isaac and Abraham didn't get along well. All right. Again, when we see that, we get a very good glimpse, and then eventually, Ishmael just disappeared. I'm sorry, I meant to say Ishmael. Ishmael just kind of goes out of the story. The next time we see Ishmael is when he come back for what? To bury his dad. He come back. But do you think Ishmael just stayed away that long? I mean, it's my son. We're in a time where what did Job do? Job said what? He would go to his children's house regularly, and he would even make offerings just in case they didn't. And we know that Abraham was a righteous man. You think he wouldn't go see his son and do the same thing that Job was doing? So when we see this, we know Ishmael and Abraham wasn't connected. There are other books to connect them, and one of the conflicts that it tells in these other books and these other historians was Ishmael and Abraham they had difficulties for the same thing that Reuben and the rest of them did, because Ishmael wanted to marry outside of the family. Abraham was like, "What are you doing? Why are you taking another wife? What's wrong with you, man? We gotta no." I'm not doing that. So he went away. And every time he would bring his wife around, what do you think Abraham would say? Now remember, he just tore his dad's house up. This is my son. I told you not to do that because we have a special purpose. You gonna go marry somebody and you gonna bring it back after I sent you? Because when we cross the notes, Abraham visited Ishmael often. We see that the return was Ishmael came to the funeral. If they had such a huge feud, the way a lot of people, and I'm not saying anybody in here, the way people paint this picture of Ishmael and Abraham, you would think they hated each other. But it was a decision made by the son that the father didn't agree with. But that doesn't mean that the father just hated him, because it's also historians to say Isaac and Ishmael had conflict, but when things came around, they actually band together. Can you imagine all them sons out there? No wonder why the fight was so great when it came up against them. But we see this conflict here in the scriptures. And we see right now that even the family that we have traveled with so far throughout these lineage and these generations up to Abraham, we're getting ready to see that things were already starting to get twisted with Nimrod and Peleg, right? So we're going to see things get twisted with Esau and Jacob. As we see the division, we'll point out the different things. So Esau goes on, if you look on that chart, Esau goes around and the Esau chart stops. And then you see the Arabs, which were of the Ishmaelite tribes. We see the Arabs, Esau tribes cut off. You see the Arabs, and then you pick back up to Edom. All right. With that being said, we see that the change of power is going back and forth. Now, I want to tell you this. When nations would conquest, they wouldn't change the name of the other nation. They would call them by their country name, but they would say that they were this. In other words, you're Greek, but you're a Jew. You're a Greek Jew. He's like, no, I'm just a regular Jew. No, I'm a Greek Jew. So we'll see how these conflicts start to play out through history. We'll see how the genealogy starts to tie into everything. And slowly, so far, we have walked from the garden all the way to Abraham in just a short matter of time. And we barely read the names. But here's the thing. We got more names to go, but are y'all starting to see how the picture of the names work? It's one of them things where you take the name and turn it into the story. And then when you take the name and turn it into a story, you'll know where you are and what side of the line are you on. Now, interesting fact as I close, when it comes to lineage, now, I looked it up. Trust me, I don't have no notes. Anybody got any questions for me so I can take stuff back to study? I really brought a blank piece of paper. This was strictly for y'all because I enjoyed.
Handout for the charts.
Do I say what?
A handout for the charts.
I do not. And somebody said that I probably could Xerox it, but when you try to take those things and condense them, you're missing a lot. It will be easier if you took a picture with your phone, and what you do is you can expand on them and take a look into the areas like that because they're really hard. You may even have to take into 4 parts so you can see it. But that chart right there is beautiful. That one right there with the lineage of Abraham, Adam to Jesus, that one's right there. And the one right there is the King cheat sheet if y'all haven't noticed. So y'all gave me the easiest class possible. So because anytime I feel like a dummy, I can literally walk over to anywhere in this room and sound intelligent. But as long as I stick to the scriptures, guess what? I ain't got nobody to argue with. Because I say that. But so as we get into this and we go a little more in depth, I'll leave y'all with a question. Who is the lineage determined through? The male, the patriarch, or the female in Jewish culture? Who is the lineage identified through? The male or the female? The male? Look at that. We already divided.
That's what it says.
So I got 5 minutes, and I think I can do this in 5.
Okay.
It's a trick question. In Hebrew culture, the male, the patriarch, is usually the lineage or the line that they follow. But for 100% certainty of what race that child is, they go with the mother. And I say this because working in the medical field, think about it. You have seen women deliver babies and a father. What that woman say, you 100% sure can say that that baby is that race. So when we look at Jesus, and we look at Joseph, when we look at Mary, who is the lineage determined through? But is also determined through Joseph. Jesus has two lines of lineage. Not that both of them are separate. They both go together to identify, again, without question, true kinglyship to the throne of David. But also, if we take it back further, we see true kinglyship back to the garden. So stay with me. We're going to walk through here, and eventually we'll get to talking about that young scrapper named David who somehow turned old in like 2 chapters. But I'm having fun. I hope that you are having fun. I literally bring a blank piece of paper every day. Hopefully y'all got questions for me so I can go back and do more homework. I promise I ain't mean to knock the microphone down so many times. I had fun.